Hello and welcome to Human Alchemy. So if anyone remembers my in-between episode where we swapped from Ross examination to Human Alchemy, you may remember me saying that we are going to maintain the name Ross examination because I cannot let it go for specific deep dive episodes where it slightly aligns more on a certain area of performance or a way in which human alchemy can be achieved, or at least that's the kind of premise we're going for. So these will be sort of 20 to 30 minute deep dives onto a particular topic that I think can be useful. And today is the first one of those. And the topic we're going to go into is the Pygmalion Effect. It's one of the first ones I came across when I started looking into performance psychology. And I think it's one I wish I knew about when I was younger. It's such a powerful one and it's so well replicated that I thought it'd be a great place to start. We're going to differentiate it slightly to human alchemy. So we'll brand it a little bit differently, and we'll have Sean and I got very accidentally, I may note, very accidentally got ourselves into a copyright claim on YouTube for our intro. We just forgot to renew our music trial. So now that we are full members of this music platform, we're going to be using a new music intro as well. And Sean will be working hard on that. So I hope you enjoy it when you hear it in a few moments. But we're going to try and slightly differentiate it and play around with a few topics every few weeks. So hopefully you enjoy this deep dive into the Pygmalion Effect. So welcome to the first episode of Ross Examination. Okay, so the Pygmalion Effect. So essentially, what is Pygmalion? Well, the Pygmalion Effect is based on a bit of a Greek myth, and I've got all my notes here as well, so I make sure I actually say the right thing as opposed to sometimes when I do talks and I go a little bit off topic. But it was based on a sculptor called Pygmalion, and he crafted this unbelievable statue, and he fell in love with the statue. And because he fell in love with it so much, the gods decided to bring it to life for him. It's actually Aphrodite took pity on his devotion and decided to make his sculpture come to life. Which brings us to where some people may have first heard of Pygmalion was actually the book that My Fair Lady was based on. So My Fair Lady, the story of Professor Henry Higgins I have here, who bets he can transform Eliza Doolittle, a Cockney flower seller, into someone who could pass as a duchess simply by teaching her to speak properly. And the original book by George Bernard Shaw was called Pygmalion, and it's been made more famous by the play and the film My Fair Lady. So that's maybe where you've also heard it. But the first place I came across this, and one of the most famous studies in the social sciences, was a study by Rosenthal and Jacobson. It's a really interesting study. So what they essentially did, and I have got, like I said, I've got the details here so I can go into this properly. I've got my coffee here as well. But essentially what they did is they went into an elementary school in California and they ran this standardized sort of IQ test. But they told the teachers the test they were actually running was assessing potential. So how good would students become? So they were trying to ID intellectual bloomers, is what they said. So students that were going to have massive improvements over the next year. And about 20% of the students were selected as these bloomers based on the tests. And the teachers were told which ones they were. Now, when they came back in at the end of the year, they tested them again. And the funny thing is, those 20% that were identified as bloomers did indeed improve at a massively higher rate than the other students. So in terms of intellectual IQ points, they increased at a much higher rate than the rest of the class. Now, the trick was they just picked 20 students at random. They picked 20 students at random, and what changed was the way that the students interacted with the teachers. So the teachers, based on the findings by Rosenthal and Jacobson, they gave them more time to answer questions. They offered more detailed feedback to those students. They smiled and nodded more often. They gave them harder material and assumed they could handle it. All those subtle differences created a loop. The child sensed the belief, felt more capable, and began to perform better, which in turn reinforced the teacher's expectations. So when I first saw this, I kind of thought, obviously, teachers that really believe in you will get the most out of you. But this has been replicated elsewhere because some people criticize this assessment as being quite a small sample size, which it was. But it's been replicated hundreds of times. So one by Schneider, Tanguy, and Bershid, if I'm pronouncing that right, probably not. This was all about male participants who spoke on the phone with women they believed were attractive or unattractive based on a photo. The women who didn't know which photo was shown behaved more warmly when men thought they were attractive. So expectations literally shape the interaction. So the women who were believed to be attractive engaged in a much more friendly way. Then, a military training in Israel, instructors were told certain trainees had high command potential and they were randomly assigned. Those soldiers performed significantly better on objective measures of leadership and training outcomes. And then in other fields as well, so implicit expectations in behavior, participants primed with words associated with hostility behaved more aggressively in later interactions. This showed that even subtle cues and expectations can drive real behavioral changes. So there are literally hundreds of examples of the Pygmalion effect. And the essential point is this: the way in which we interact with people will frame the way they behave. As I say, hundreds of different tests. The Pygmalion effect is actually where we get the best out of someone. The opposite of the Pygmalion effect is something called the Golem effect. The Golem effect is where we treat someone like they're bad and they become bad. And it's really interesting on this one. I've found, certainly myself, that if someone starts to annoy me, everything they do then bothers me. And it becomes this almost self-fulfilling prophecy of, I expect this person to be bad, therefore I start treating them a little bit worse. Me then treating them a little bit worse makes them act slightly worse, and then they act worse. I see that and go, as I thought, and round we go until it deepens and deepens and becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So if we build this as kind of like a map, and I'll try and do this for people listening, is the first thing that happens is others' expectations about us influence their behavior towards us. I've got this little diagram here, so I'll put it up. So others' expectations about us influence their behavior towards us. Their behavior towards us influences how we see ourselves. Then how we see ourselves influences our behavior. And then our behavior towards others influences their beliefs, reinforcing their expectations. So you can kind of see, if I take an example, others' expectations about us influence their behavior towards us. So someone doesn't think we're very funny, so they maybe don't laugh at one of our jokes. Their behavior of not laughing at our jokes influences how we see ourselves. They didn't laugh at my joke, therefore I'm probably not that funny. How we see ourselves influences our behavior. They didn't laugh at my joke, therefore I'm not funny, therefore I'm probably going to tell less jokes. Our behaviors towards others influences their beliefs, reinforcing their expectations. Well, I'm not telling as many jokes, therefore people aren't laughing at anything I say because I'm not making the jokes, therefore they think I'm even less funny because I never make any jokes, and their expectation happens again, and round we go. So you can start to see how this happens, and it can also happen in a positive way. You know, you make one joke, someone laughs, maybe I'm funny, I'll make another joke, and again and again and again. So this is how the nature of the wheel works, and I think the more and more you look into this, the more it becomes more solid. So it's also not just what's said, because we can all probably say the right things. If someone doesn't really believe in you or doesn't like you that much, it's rare they'll actually say it. It's much more in the body language. I once had a coach who had clearly worked on growth mindset, and the whole idea, sort of Carol Dweck, growth mindset, is that you always think about getting better. Essentially, if we break it down to its core, it's always about how can we be better? How can we be better? And I had a coach that clearly read about this, and we were doing some kicking drills. And usually he'd get annoyed with me if I got something wrong. And he'd clearly changed his tack for this session. So I made a bad kick, and he kind of went, okay, all right, don't worry about that. What could you do better? And I was like, okay, yeah, I could probably point my foot more and follow through a bit better, keep my head down. He said, brilliant, try it again. And I spooned the kick off to the side. And so this time he was a little bit like, all right, it's all right. What would you do better? And we kept going along doing this. And finally, I muck up the kick again. And he says the same thing, what could you do better? But his body language looked like he was just completely at the end of his tether. And I can completely feel that. So a lot of our reading of cues of whether people believe in us or not is actually subconscious things that are given away. So we have to actively try and maintain the body language and the cues that we really believe in someone, even though the evidence might not be there. Otherwise, that self-fulfilling prophecy is going to start. So you can really tell when someone is either into you or not. I've been asked by coaches, first-team coaches before, I've asked for feedback or something like this, or I do a drill. Every other player will do the drill and they get a decent bit of feedback, and mine is just, okay, nice, and off you go. You can tell they don't even really care about your outcome, which is probably even worse than a negative reaction. At least if it's negative, there's a care there, but it was almost an apathy. When you speak to players and they talk about their best time playing sport, And they'll always talk about a coach that really believed in them. I had it myself. Best time I ever played. I felt the coach really cared about me doing well. And what that does is it basically raises your ceiling for performance. When you think someone doesn't rate you, what you often do, what most players do, is they try and rid mistakes or reasons for them not to like you. And what that does is it raises the floor of your performance, but it often lowers the ceiling because you start to become risk averse. Now, it's funny because with this Pygmalion effect, we're very susceptible to this belief. It's all really about belief, especially when you're young. So when I was about 7 years old, I remember I was dancing around in the kitchen and my mum said to me, she said, "Oh, Ross, you've got great rhythm. You've got great rhythm. You could be a dancer one day." And I remember that today. Now, for clarity, I do not have great rhythm. I am not a very good dancer. But I still have this belief in the back of my head that if it really came down to it, if I really wanted to sharpen my tools with dancing, I could do it because of this inner belief that I actually do have rhythm. And as soon as I have a few drinks and I'm in a club or something like that, maybe it comes out. This is my time to show my rhythm. But the thing is, that belief that my mum had in me there, and she said to me at a very young and sort of raw age, stuck with me. Even though a lot of the evidence points to me not having much great rhythm. Now imagine if that was a negative. Imagine if she had said, "Why are you so stupid?" Or "Come on, this is so easy," or something like this when we're talking about a topic. Suddenly you get this belief that a lot of people hold, that teachers have said to them, or this or that, and they always talk about when they get older, is this belief that they're not intelligent. And it's so powerful. And then it frames how you see yourself, then frames your actions, and then your actions frame how other people treat you. And around we go. So especially when we're talking about parents or coaches of younger people, it is so important to focus on the beliefs you want to instill in the person, even though you might not be seeing it. I actually listened to a New Zealand cricket coach the other day talking about how in New Zealand, they don't do very much coaching at a young age. They just try and get you to experiment and try things. But over here, we're very much, what is the right way to do it? Well, we need to teach them that. And what that often does is point out mistakes. And by pointing out mistakes, you're often highlighting bad things, and that can come across criticism. When you're young, you need to experiment, you need to play freely. And that's why I think, British players in most sports have lower ceilings than other players that are going to really try. And at the top level, it's about who can risk most, who can really go for it. So we have probably slightly higher floors, but lower ceilings. And I think if we really want to get the best performance out of people, when we look at it from a management point of view as well, we need people to really believe in themselves. We don't want them to be massively risk averse. We want them to believe in what they're doing. And in order to do that, they need to believe in themselves. And this is where too much competition is not great in teams. I know a lot of people talk about we had great competition. The best teams I've seen aren't chopping and changing all the time. They actually have a fair amount of security in the starting player's position. And you see it in F1 as well when there's two drivers competing. It's never great for the overall performance. It's not great for their stress levels. When you have a clear number one, they're going to have competition from other people anyway, from the opposition. I think what too much competition does is actually highlights a lack of belief in you from some of the coaches. If we're not quite sure about you, then that competition is high. And now that's something that we could probably debate in another video. But I think it's a super powerful thing to make sure that people are secure, that you believe in them. And we see this with Brendan McCullum's England cricket team. They give people extra belief, even if their performances aren't necessarily warranting it. It's like, look, I want you to play with confidence. And in order for you to do that, you need to feel like you're believed in, even if things don't go your way. So I think one of the ways I see it as well is when you look at friendship groups and you probably know someone who is an absolute, they're a hoot around a certain group. And then you put them in another group and they're much quieter. Maybe it's their work group, or maybe it's a different friendship group from school, or maybe it's from university, wherever it is. There is a significant change in the way they act. And the Pygmalion effect often explains this. The expectations that group has of you informs the way you behave around them. So it's not a solid thing of the total sum of everyone's expectations, but it's completely fluid. You could be the life of the party in one and not in the other because of the way that group interacts with you. And you've seen it when someone goes into a group and they're all laughing and joking, they suddenly become all fun and they have to go and join another group. Maybe they don't know so well, or maybe that group's not as friendly toward them and they go within their shell. Same person, completely different behaviors. And it's framed purely because of the expectations of the group they're talking to. And I see this with individuals as well. There are certain people that everyone has massively high opinions of. They're a great, fun person. They can't wait to see them and hang around with them. And other people do the complete opposite. I feel it myself. Certain people I look forward to, and I know the first thing we do is we're going to have a few joes, we're going to swap a few stories, this and that. But the way they interact with me allows me to be that way. When there are other people that I know are going to be a little bit off with me, or I know it's a bit of a slog, it changes the way I act as well. And you see this with teachers in school, with certain coaches. We've already spoken about coaching, but think about teaching. We've seen it in the experiment. But I had teachers that would come in and you knew they wanted to get you better. And that made me engage more because I wanted to be that. They gave me an aspiration to live up to. And I think they call it calling a dog a dog. Call someone something and they will live up to it. So if you say, it's like when you're trying to ask someone to do something, if you say, Mum, you're the most helpful person I know. Would you help me carry my box down? And then suddenly they're like, well, I want to maintain that position. Maybe I should help you. But in the same way, when someone comes and treats you like you're really fun and everything like this, you live up to it a little bit more. So to finish this off, the question is, how can we actually use this to drive results or improve our lives? And I think it's a twist on the old adage of treat others as you'd like to be treated. It's treat others as you'd want them to behave. So if you want people to be kind and helpful and funny and engaging, treat them as if they are that, and we will start to see tweaks in that behavior toward it. You're not going to change them fundamentally as a person, but you may change them when they're around you. The Pygmalion Effect is unbelievably well studied as social science goes. You know, we had the replication crisis where loads of different studies were called into question, but this one is pretty robust. And in terms of something that I wish I knew when I was a bit younger, instead of stropping with people and people that I expected to be bad, treating them like they already like that, and then it gets worse and worse, and suddenly I've got people that I cannot work with or I don't get on with. I look at other people that are just magnets to positivity. Everyone seems to like them and get on with them, and kind of think, how do you like this person that I find absolutely detestable? And then you watch them interact with them and they're like, well, they don't act like that with me. And suddenly you start to realize, right, we are creating the way in which other people interact with us. We are engaging them in certain ways because no one really believes they're fundamentally a bad person. So how do we get the best out of people? And this effect, the Pygmalion Effect, for me is the answer to that. When I think about this when it comes back to the job and working, we look at managers, and why do some managers have everyone in their team do better? Why do some sports teams have everyone who joins the team do better? Because it cannot be purely on the individual. It's the environment that's created without them, the belief that is instilled in them, and the way you treat them. So managers, that everyone comes into their team, they give them the best shot, they really big them up, all this sort of thing, and suddenly no one's ever believed in me before. This person believes in me. I'm going to bring my best self out. So when you go away from this, have a little think about how you can get the best out of people. Who is it that you want to treat you in a certain way? We know that managers and coaches and teachers who are sort of above in the learning cycle, they're the ones teaching. But we can probably do it the other way as well, treating the coach or the manager like they are a great manager. Maybe they then treat you in a better way, so we can reverse engineer it. And the final one as well is actually Pygmalion affecting or golem affecting ourselves. The beliefs we have about ourselves informs our behavior. And then our behavior forms our outcome then forms our expectations, and round we go. I think that's why it's so important to treat yourself with the same respect that you're trying to treat these other people with, because you're going to start framing your own outcome. You're going to Pygmalion yourself. You're going to golem yourself. So I think I wanted to start with the Pygmalion Effect because I think it's one of the easiest to implement and one of the most powerful and one of the most well-researched. And it's pretty applicable across all disciplines. It's basically human interactions that we can use the Pygmalion Effect to our advantage. So I'm going to close it there because I don't want to spend too long on these episodes. I want them to be fairly short and sharp. If you enjoyed it, do let me know. It'd be great to get any feedback. Or if you think this is absolutely awful, never ever do one of these again, let me know softly. Use the Pygmalion Effect. And so next week we have a fantastic guest, a man named Dave Pounds. So make sure to tune in for that. But otherwise, thank you for tuning in as always. Hopefully it's been worth your while. and have a great week or day. Pleasure. Bye-bye.